The people who underestimate you on your quietest day are often the first to fear the truth they never saw coming. At exactly 7:12 on a gray Monday morning, the parking lot outside the Metro Police Department looked like every other beginning to a work week. Patrol cruisers rolled in one after another, coffee cups rested on dashboards, radios crackled with routine dispatches, and officers hurried through the entrance preparing for another shift. Nothing about the morning suggested history was about to change. A woman stepped out of a modest silver sedan parked near the far end of the lot. She wore dark slacks, a simple navy blazer, and carried a weathered leather portfolio instead of a uniform bag. There were no medals on display, no insignia on her shoulders, no security escort walking beside her. To anyone passing by, she looked like another visitor trying to find the right office before business hours officially began. Her name was Maya Brooks, and she paused for only a moment before looking across the building. Her eyes lingered on the American flag moving gently above the entrance, then on the officers greeting one another with easy familiarity. She noticed who held doors open for civilians, who ignored them, who smiled naturally, and who scanned every unfamiliar face with suspicion instead of professionalism. Years of leadership had taught her that culture revealed itself long before policies did. She checked the time on her watch. She was nearly 45 minutes early, exactly as she intended. First impressions were never created during speeches. They were uncovered before anyone realized they were being observed. As she crossed the parking lot, two patrol officers emerged from the side entrance laughing about something that had happened during the previous night's shift. Officer Ethan Walker carried himself with the confidence of someone convinced he understood every situation before asking a single question. Beside him, Officer Ryan Collins matched his pace, nodding along to every joke without much thought of his own. Their conversation slowed the moment they noticed Maya walking alone toward the building. Ethan's expression shifted from casual amusement to quiet judgment in less than a second. Ryan followed his gaze. Neither officer knew her name. Neither had seen her personnel file. Neither realized the department's future had just parked 20 yards away. They saw only what they expected to see, and expectations can become dangerous when they replace facts. Maya continued walking without changing her pace. She had encountered skeptical looks in federal buildings, military bases, courtrooms, and command centers across the country. Experience had taught her something simple. The loudest assumptions usually came from the people least prepared for the truth. She offered a polite smile as she approached the front walkway, but it was not returned. Instead, the morning air seemed to grow noticeably quieter as Ethan stepped forward, blocking part of the entrance with an authority he believed no one would question. Maya stopped calmly, meeting his eyes without anger or fear. Around them, several officers slowed their steps, sensing an ordinary conversation was somehow about to become a day no one inside the department would ever forget. Officer Ethan Walker folded his arms with the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed without hesitation. His voice carried across the entrance just loudly enough for nearby officers and civilian employees to notice. "Good morning, ma'am. This area is restricted before official business hours. What brings you here today?" Maya Brooks answered with the same calm expression she had worn since stepping out of her car. "I have business inside the building." Her response was polite, direct, and offered nothing more than necessary. Ethan exchanged a brief glance with Officer Ryan Collins before looking back at her. "Do you have identification?" Maya reached into her portfolio and paused for a moment before lowering her hand again. "I will be happy to present it to the appropriate person inside." The answer only seemed to increase Ethan's skepticism. Ryan gave a faint smile that suggested he had already decided exactly who she was. Around them, several officers slowed their pace without appearing obvious. A receptionist standing inside the glass lobby looked toward the entrance with quiet curiosity. The routine rhythm of the morning had begun to shift. Ethan took another step, remaining between Maya and the front doors. "It is a simple request," he said. "People cannot just walk into a police headquarters." Maya nodded once. "I understand security procedures very well." Her steady tone somehow made the silence around them even heavier. She did not sound defensive. She sounded experienced. Ethan interpreted that confidence differently. "Then you understand why we have to ask questions." Maya answered, "Questions are part of professionalism. Assumptions are not." Ryan let out a short laugh before speaking. "You sound like you have done this before." Maya met his eyes without changing her expression. More times than you might imagine. Neither officer recognized the quiet certainty behind her words. Instead, they exchanged another look that reflected growing impatience rather than curiosity. Ethan gestured toward a visitor sign mounted beside the entrance. If you have an appointment, give us the name of the person you are meeting. Maya glanced briefly at the sign before looking back at him. The person I am meeting is expecting me. Ryan shook his head. That is not how this works. Several feet away, an older maintenance employee slowed his cart and watched the exchange for a moment before continuing inside. Two younger officers walking toward roll call hesitated, sensing the conversation had become unusually tense, but neither interrupted. Maya remained perfectly still, her portfolio resting comfortably at her side. She noticed every face, every passing glance, every security camera positioned above the entrance. Years of command had taught her that facts always mattered more than emotions, and details often became the difference between assumptions and truth. Ethan finally exhaled, clearly frustrated that the conversation was not unfolding the way he expected. Ma'am, until we verify who you are, you will need to wait out here. Maya simply nodded. If that is your decision, I will wait. There was no argument, no raised voice, no visible irritation. Her composure unsettled the officers more than resistance would have. As another patrol vehicle entered the parking lot, and the morning briefing drew closer, neither Ethan nor Ryan realized that every passing minute was bringing the department closer to a revelation that would permanently redefine this ordinary Monday morning. The cool morning breeze drifted through the parking lot as the city slowly awakened around the station. Yet Maya Brooks stood with the same quiet patience she had carried from the moment she arrived. She did not glance at her watch again. She did not pace. She did not protest. Instead, she observed. Every passing second revealed more about the department than any orientation packet ever could. Officers streamed through the entrance in small groups, some offering courteous greetings to one another. Others focused only on reaching the briefing room before roll call. A few noticed the woman waiting outside and looked away almost immediately, deciding that whatever was happening was not their concern. Others slowed just enough to catch fragments of the conversation before continuing inside. Maya remembered every face. Leadership had taught her that silence often revealed character more clearly than speeches ever could. Officer Ethan Walker remained convinced he had handled the situation correctly. In his mind, caution justified everything. Officer Ryan Collins leaned casually against a nearby patrol vehicle, quietly amused by what he believed was an ordinary security stop. Neither man questioned whether their first assumptions had shaped every decision that followed. That certainty interested Maya far more than their words. She carefully studied the security cameras mounted above the entrance, noting their angles without making the movement obvious. She also noticed several officers wearing body cameras as they entered the building for their shift. Technology had changed modern policing. Memories could disagree. Video rarely did. A young community service officer approached the entrance carrying several boxes filled with school outreach materials. Seeing Maya standing there, he offered a polite smile before opening the door for her out of simple courtesy. Ethan immediately thanked the young officer but reminded him that procedures came first. The younger officer apologized without argument and quietly disappeared inside. Maya appreciated the small gesture. Respect often appeared in ordinary moments, even when others failed to notice it. Across the parking lot, Captain Daniel Foster stepped out of an unmarked vehicle while reviewing notes on his tablet. His schedule for the morning centered on introducing the department's new commander during the first leadership assembly. He had received only a brief personnel summary and had never met her in person. Delayed by an early phone call from City Hall, he entered through a side door without looking toward the front entrance, unknowingly passing within a few dozen feet of the person everyone inside would soon be waiting to meet. Maya watched him disappear into the building without concern. There would be time for introductions soon enough. What mattered now was understanding the people she had been chosen to lead. She believed every organization revealed its true culture long before anyone entered a conference room. Policies lived on paper. Character lived in everyday choices. Ethan checked the time and sighed. Morning briefing would begin shortly. He expected this situation to end the same way countless routine encounters had ended before. He had no reason to think this day would become the story every officer in the department would remember for years. Maya simply adjusted her grip on the leather portfolio and looked toward the front doors once more. Her expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as though she were watching the final pieces of a much larger picture quietly fall into place. Inside the building, the announcement welcoming the department's new commander was only minutes away, and no one standing outside had the slightest idea that the woman patiently waiting at the entrance was about to change everything they believed they understood about authority, professionalism, and first impressions. Inside the headquarters, the atmosphere carried the familiar rhythm of a busy Monday morning. Yet beneath the routine conversations, something else quietly lingered. Officers gathered in briefing rooms. Supervisors reviewed overnight reports, and administrative staff prepared conference materials for the leadership meeting that had been marked on every calendar for weeks. The arrival of a new commander had become the subject of endless speculation. Some expected a decorated veteran from a neighboring city. Others believed the department would promote someone already inside the organization. Very few admitted they were nervous about the changes that new leadership might bring. Captain Daniel Foster stood at the front of the main conference room, reviewing his notes one final time. The welcome remarks were straightforward, but the responsibility behind them felt heavier than usual. The department had faced growing pressure from city leaders to strengthen public trust, improve accountability, and rebuild confidence throughout the community. Foster understood that the person walking through those doors would inherit more than a title. They would inherit every unresolved problem that had quietly accumulated over the years. Meanwhile, outside the building, Maya Brooks remained exactly where Officer Ethan Walker had asked her to wait. She showed no sign of frustration despite the passing time. Instead, she watched employees enter through the front doors with the calm curiosity of someone studying a living organization rather than simply visiting it. Every greeting, every hurried conversation, every respectful gesture, and every dismissive glance became another piece of information. She had learned long ago that the first lesson about any institution was rarely found inside policy manuals. It appeared in ordinary interactions when people believed no one important was watching. Ethan checked his watch again. The briefing was about to begin, and he did not want to arrive late. He looked toward Maya with growing confidence that he had handled the situation responsibly. "You will need to remain here until someone can verify your appointment," he said in an even tone. Maya simply nodded. "Thank you for letting me know." Her answer surprised him once again. There was no complaint, no attempt to argue, and no effort to force the conversation in another direction. Ryan Collins quietly chuckled. Most people would have lost their patience by now. Maya looked toward the front entrance before replying. Patience often reveals more than impatience ever could. Ryan smiled politely, but dismissed the comment without giving it another thought. Neither officer realized that the woman standing before them had already formed a clearer picture of the department than many people developed after months on the job. A dispatcher stepped outside carrying a folder and paused beside Ethan. "Captain Foster wants every available officer in the main conference room in 5 minutes," she said before hurrying back inside. Ethan acknowledged the message and turned toward Ryan. "Looks like the new commander is finally here." Ryan glanced around the parking lot. "Hopefully this one knows how to straighten the place out." Maya lowered her eyes for just a moment, almost as if reflecting on the words, before lifting them again toward the entrance. The building suddenly became much quieter as officers moved inside for the assembly. One by one, conversations faded into anticipation. Somewhere beyond the lobby doors, Captain Foster stepped toward the podium while a member of the administrative staff walked quickly down the hallway searching for one final person who had not yet arrived. Outside, the morning sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that day, casting a soft glow across the entrance as Maya adjusted the portfolio in her hand and began walking calmly toward the doors, knowing that within the next few moments every assumption made that morning would collide with a truth no one had expected. The conference room settled into an expectant silence as more than 100 officers found their seats. Conversations faded into whispers before disappearing altogether when Captain Daniel Foster stepped behind the podium. The large department seal mounted on the wall reflected the morning light streaming through the tall windows, reminding everyone that leadership could change overnight, but the responsibility behind the badge remained constant. Foster looked across the room, taking a slow breath before speaking. Thank you all for being here this morning. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this department. Our next commander brings years of experience in federal investigations, organizational leadership, and public service. I expect every member of this agency to offer the same professionalism and respect that our community deserves. Ethan Walker leaned back comfortably in his chair. Ryan Collins sat beside him, quietly wondering whether the new commander would focus on stricter policies or simply continue the traditions already in place. Around them, officers exchanged brief looks, each imagining someone different walking through the entrance. Foster glanced toward the rear doors before smiling politely. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Commander Maya Brooks. Every head in the room turned at once. The doors opened slowly, and the woman who stepped inside moved with the same calm confidence she had shown all morning. She now wore the formal command uniform that had remained carefully folded inside her portfolio. The polished badge on her chest reflected the overhead lights, and the insignia on her shoulders removed every possible doubt about her authority. The room became completely silent. Ethan stopped breathing for what felt like several seconds. Ryan stared without blinking, searching desperately for an explanation that refused to appear. The woman they had kept waiting outside only minutes earlier now walked directly toward the front of the room, as every officer instinctively stood to acknowledge the department's new commander. Maya acknowledged the room with a respectful nod before shaking Captain Foster's hand. Foster welcomed her warmly, completely unaware of the events that had unfolded outside the building. Maya stepped to the podium and looked across the faces gathered before her. Her eyes briefly rested on Ethan and Ryan. Neither officer could hold her gaze for long. She did not appear angry. She did not appear satisfied. She simply looked at them with the composed expression of a leader quietly observing the people entrusted to her command. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm and measured. "Thank you for your welcome. Every department has policies, procedures, and traditions. Those matter. But culture is built through everyday decisions, especially the ones people believe no one important will ever see." Several officers exchanged uncertain glances. The words sounded carefully chosen, as though they carried a meaning only a few people in the room could fully understand. Maya continued without raising her voice. "This morning gave me an unexpected opportunity to observe this department before anyone knew who I was. Sometimes the most valuable introduction is not the one planned on a calendar. It is the one created by ordinary moments." Ethan felt the weight of every sentence growing heavier. Ryan lowered his eyes toward the floor, suddenly unable to meet anyone else's gaze. The conference room remained completely still. Maya allowed a brief pause before offering a composed smile that carried neither bitterness nor triumph. "Some of you have already met me today," she said gently, "and I believe that meeting will become an important lesson for all of us as we move forward together." No one moved for several long seconds after Commander Maya Brooks finished speaking. The silence inside the conference room carried far more weight than any raised voice ever could. Captain Daniel Foster slowly looked across the audience, noticing expressions that ranged from surprise to quiet discomfort. He had expected curiosity about the department's new leader. He had not expected an entire room of experienced officers to appear as though they had just realized they had missed something standing directly in front of them. Maya allowed the silence to settle before continuing. "Trust is not created by speeches. It is created by consistent choices. Every interaction with a member of the public reflects the values of this department, whether anyone believes they are being observed or not." Her words were calm, deliberate, and impossible to misunderstand. Ethan Walker felt every sentence land with increasing weight. He replayed the morning in his mind, remembering each assumption he had made before asking meaningful questions. Ryan Collins stared at the conference table, recognizing that what had seemed like an ordinary encounter now looked very different through the eyes of the entire department. Maya rested both hands lightly on the podium. Leadership is not about finding people to blame. Leadership is about finding the truth and learning from it. She paused before looking toward Captain Foster. "Captain, immediately after this meeting, I would like the body camera recordings and security footage from the front entrance beginning at 7 o'clock this morning preserved according to department policy." Foster nodded without hesitation. "Yes, Commander." Maya continued. I would also like a complete timeline of the interaction, including all available witness statements. Accuracy matters. Every person involved deserves an objective review based on facts rather than assumptions. Several supervisors quietly wrote notes. The request sounded procedural rather than emotional. There was no demand for punishment. There was no display of personal resentment. Instead, the new commander demonstrated exactly how accountability was supposed to function. Facts first, conclusions second. The room seemed to relax slightly, although the tension had not disappeared. Officers who had witnessed the encounter outside began exchanging thoughtful glances. They realized they would likely be asked to describe exactly what they had seen, and many found themselves wishing they had paid closer attention earlier that morning. Maya looked across the audience once more. An investigation is not a verdict, she said. It is a commitment to fairness. That commitment applies equally to every member of this department and every member of the community we serve. Ethan finally raised his eyes toward the podium. For the first time that morning, he understood that authority did not need volume to command respect. The quiet confidence standing before him carried more influence than any order he had ever heard shouted across a briefing room. Maya concluded her opening remarks with a steady voice. If we expect the public to trust us, then we must first prove that we are willing to hold ourselves to the same standards we promise everyone else. That begins today. As the meeting adjourned, officers slowly rose from their seats, but the usual conversations never returned. Instead, the room emptied in thoughtful silence while supervisors moved quickly to secure the requested recordings. Outside, the security cameras continued recording the ordinary flow of another Monday morning, unaware that the images they had quietly captured only a short time earlier were about to become the first test of a commander's promise that integrity would always stand above assumption. By early afternoon, the conference room had been transformed into a quiet workspace where facts replaced speculation. Commander Maya Brooks sat at the head of the table with Captain Daniel Foster beside her, while members of internal affairs, legal advisors, and supervising officers reviewed the material collected throughout the morning. A large monitor displayed synchronized security footage from multiple cameras covering the front entrance. Every arrival, every conversation, and every movement had been preserved exactly as it happened. Maya watched without interruption, occasionally making a brief note before returning her attention to the screen. She never commented while the recordings played. She believed evidence deserved complete attention before opinions entered the conversation. Officer Ethan Walker and Officer Ryan Collins sat several seats away, waiting for their opportunity to provide formal statements. The confidence they had carried only hours earlier had disappeared, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that routine habits often looked very different when viewed from an objective perspective. The recordings showed Maya arriving quietly, greeting the officers politely, and responding to every question with patience and respect. They also revealed several moments where additional information could have been requested but was not. Instead, assumptions had gradually shaped the interaction. No single moment explained the entire problem. It was the pattern that drew everyone's attention. Maya finally looked away from the monitor and folded her hands. "This review is not about embarrassing anyone," she said calmly. "It is about understanding how ordinary decisions can create extraordinary consequences." Captain Foster nodded in agreement. The purpose of accountability is improvement, not humiliation. One by one, officers who had witnessed portions of the encounter shared what they remembered. Their recollections varied in small details, but together they painted a remarkably consistent picture. Several admitted they had noticed the situation becoming uncomfortable but assumed someone else would intervene if necessary. Others confessed they had simply continued walking because they believed it was not their responsibility. Maya listened carefully to every statement without interrupting. When the final witness finished speaking, she allowed a thoughtful silence before responding. "Culture is never created by one individual alone," she said. "It grows through the choices everyone makes, including the choice to remain silent." Her words settled heavily across the room. They were not directed at Ethan or Ryan alone. They applied equally to supervisors, witnesses, and leaders. The investigation expanded beyond the events of that morning. Internal Affairs compared the incident with previous complaints involving public interactions, training evaluations, and supervisory reports from the past several years. Gradually, a larger pattern began to emerge. While many officers consistently demonstrated professionalism, there were repeated examples showing inconsistent communication, premature assumptions, and missed opportunities to de-escalate routine encounters through respectful dialogue. Captain Foster looked troubled as the reports accumulated. "We focused on individual incidents," he admitted quietly. "We should have been paying closer attention to the trends." Maya nodded. Organizations rarely change because of one dramatic event. They change when leaders are willing to recognize patterns before those patterns become traditions. By the end of the review, no final disciplinary decisions had been announced. Instead, Maya issued a different directive. Every finding would follow established department procedures. Every employee would receive a fair review, and every conclusion would be supported by documented evidence rather than emotion. As the meeting concluded, the atmosphere throughout headquarters had shifted noticeably. Officers no longer spoke about what had happened outside the entrance as an isolated misunderstanding. They had begun to recognize it as the first visible sign of deeper issues that had quietly existed for years, and for the first time, they believed someone had arrived with both the courage and the discipline to confront them. The following morning, the atmosphere inside Metro Police headquarters felt noticeably different. Conversations were quieter, greetings were more deliberate, and even the familiar sound of footsteps through the hallways seemed measured rather than hurried. News of the internal review had spread throughout every division, not through rumors, but through official communication that emphasized transparency, professionalism, and accountability. Commander Maya Brooks had made one expectation unmistakably clear. Every decision would follow established policy, every employee would be treated fairly, and every conclusion would be supported by documented evidence. When the review process reached its conclusion, the findings were presented to the department's leadership board. Officer Ethan Walker received formal disciplinary action based on the documented facts, including violations of professional conduct and failure to follow established communication procedures during a citizen contact. Officer Ryan Collins received separate disciplinary measures reflecting his own conduct and his failure to help correct the situation as it unfolded. The consequences were not announced with dramatic speeches or public embarrassment. They were delivered privately, professionally, and according to department regulations. Maya insisted that accountability should never become a spectacle. It should become a lesson. The review also identified supervisory failures that had allowed unhealthy habits to remain unchallenged for far too long. Captain Daniel Foster accepted responsibility for gaps in oversight and voluntarily introduced new supervisory review procedures for every patrol shift. Rather than defending past practices, he acknowledged that leadership required the courage to recognize weaknesses before expecting improvement from others. His willingness to accept responsibility surprised many officers, and it quietly encouraged others to examine their own decisions with greater honesty. During the department's next all-hands meeting, Maya stood before the assembled officers without notes or prepared remarks. She looked across the room, recognizing many of the same faces she had observed during her first morning outside the building. This time, however, the room reflected something different. There was no curiosity about who she was. There was respect earned through consistency rather than authority alone. "Every badge represents public trust," she said calmly. "That trust is strengthened one interaction at a time. People may forget our names, but they rarely forget how we made them feel. Professionalism begins long before a report is written. It begins with the first words we choose and the assumptions we refuse to make." No one spoke. Every officer listened. Maya continued, "This department will not be defined by its worst moments. It will be defined by how honestly it responds to them." She then announced a series of new initiatives, including expanded communication training, leadership mentoring, scenario-based decision exercises, and regular reviews focused on respectful public interactions. The purpose was not simply to correct one incident. It was to strengthen the culture of the entire organization for years to come. As officers left the meeting, Ethan paused near the entrance of the conference room. His career had taken an unexpected turn, but for the first time he understood that authority without humility could easily become poor judgment. Ryan quietly walked beside him, both men carrying a deeper awareness of how quickly assumptions could shape actions and how lasting the consequences could become. Maya remained inside the room for a few extra moments, looking at the department seal displayed on the wall. She knew meaningful change would never happen in a single meeting or through a single decision. It would be built day after day through ordinary choices made by ordinary people. That morning had begun with assumptions. It was now ending with accountability. And for the first time in a long time, the department was moving toward the future with a clearer understanding that real leadership was measured not by power over others, but by the willingness to uphold fairness even when doing so required difficult decisions. 6 months later, the headquarters looked much the same from the outside, but anyone who walked through its doors could feel the difference almost immediately. The conversations between officers and citizens carried more patience. Supervisors spent more time coaching than correcting. Training rooms that had once been reserved mainly for annual requirements were now filled every week with discussions about communication, judgment, and public trust. New recruits quickly learned that professionalism was not measured by how much authority they possessed, but by how they treated people who appeared to have none. Commander Maya Brooks never spoke publicly about her first morning at the department unless someone asked directly. Even then, she rarely described herself as the central figure. Instead, she described the experience as a reminder that leadership begins long before introductions are made. During orientation sessions, she often told new officers, "Every person you meet has a story you do not know. Your responsibility is to discover the facts before you form the conclusion." Those words gradually became one of the department's unofficial guiding principles. Captain Daniel Foster noticed the change as well. Community complaints steadily declined, while positive feedback from neighborhood meetings increased. Officers who had once viewed additional training as an obligation now volunteered to mentor younger colleagues. The culture had not changed because policies became thicker or procedures became longer. It changed because people finally understood that respect was not an optional courtesy. It was the foundation of effective policing. Ethan Walker had spent months reflecting on the choices that altered the direction of his career. Accepting responsibility had not been easy, but avoiding responsibility would have been far more damaging. Determined to rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than promises, he approached every assignment with a level of humility he had never practiced before. Ryan Collins experienced a similar transformation. He became more willing to ask questions before making assumptions, and more willing to speak up when something did not feel right. Both men learned that character was not defined by the worst decision a person ever made, but by what they chose to do after recognizing it. One autumn afternoon, Maya stood outside the same front entrance where she had quietly waited on her first day. The trees lining the parking lot had turned shades of gold and crimson, and a gentle breeze carried fallen leaves across the pavement. She watched a young patrol officer greet an elderly visitor with patience, offer clear directions, and hold the front door open with genuine respect. The interaction lasted less than a minute, and neither person realized the commander had witnessed it. Maya smiled softly because that simple exchange represented the kind of leadership she had hoped to inspire. No ceremony announced the moment. No applause followed. Real change rarely arrived with dramatic music or grand speeches. It appeared quietly, one decision at a time, until those decisions became habits and those habits became culture. As the afternoon sun settled behind the city skyline, Maya looked once more at the department seal above the entrance before walking back inside. She understood that justice was never a destination someone reached once and kept forever. It was a commitment renewed every single day through integrity, discipline, and compassion. The badge could grant authority, the uniform could command attention, and rank could open doors, but only character could earn lasting respect. And in the end, the people who chose fairness over assumption did not simply become better officers. They became the reason their community could believe in justice again.